Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're taking a diagnostic journey into the absolute hidden mechanics of vision, specifically pediatric eye movements and the surprisingly complex decisions behind prescribing kids their glasses. It is so much more than just asking a kid to read some letters off a chart on the wall.
Right, so think about this for a second. Having perfect 20/20 vision? That is actually only half of the reading equation. You can have crystal clear focus, but if your eyes simply don't have the mechanical ability to track words in a sequence, reading just completely collapses. For a lot of kids struggling in school, it's not about things being blurry at all. It's a pure mechanics issue.
And that brings us to the star of the show today, oculomotility. We're going to put oculomotility under the microscope to see exactly how optometrists evaluate if a kid's eyes can effectively work together as a team to track, to read, and ultimately, to learn.
Here is our clinical journey for today. We'll start with 1. Evaluating ocular control. 2. Scoring eye movements. 3. Testing reading efficiency. 4. Vision therapy games. And 5. When to prescribe glasses. Let's get into it.
Section 1. Evaluating ocular control. Our clinical detective work basically begins just by watching how a child's eyes behave. The doctor has to figure out, can this child's eyes track a moving target, like a little pen light or a fixation paddle, without completely losing control.
To figure that out, we are testing 3 fundamental skills here. First is fixation, which is literally just holding the eyes totally steady on one target. Second is pursuits. That's the ability to smoothly track a target moving in a path, usually no more than 20 centimeters in diameter, right at the patient's midline. And third is saccades, which means accurately jumping the eyes between 2 separate targets held about 10 centimeters apart. Now, what the clinician is laser focused on here is whether the kid can do all this using only their eyes. If a child is heavily relying on moving their entire head or their whole body just to follow the target, that is a massive red flag. Clinically, we call that motor overflow.
Section 2. Scoring eye movements. Okay, so once the doctor makes those chairside observations, they need a reliable way to turn those somewhat qualitative movements into hard, standardized medical data. If we look at the extremes of this scoring system, it's night and day. You've got a perfect 4+ score on one end, which means the kid is showing smooth, highly accurate movements across the board. But on the flip side, a failing 1+ score means they literally can't do the task, or, very often, it's heavily characterized by uncontrolled head movement. Honestly, if a child has to turn their whole head just to track a little pen light, they are failing the oculomotility test.
Section 3. Testing reading efficiency. Now let's zoom in on how clinicians test the specific eye movements directly involved in the reading process, particularly for kids between 6 and 13 years old.
This is where the developmental eye movement test comes in, or the DEM for short. It's a really clever test because it actively isolates the physical visual mechanics from a child's basic reading ability. It does this in 2 parts. First up, the vertical test. This just measures how fast a child can name numbers out loud reading down a column. It has absolutely zero to do with horizontal eye movements. It's just setting their baseline processing speed. Then they take the horizontal test. This is a simulated reading task that tests their visual search skills and eye movement efficiency as they physically track numbers from left to right.
Let's look at a real-world example from our source data. We have a 9-year-old female patient taking this exact DM test. She absolutely crushed the vertical columns, did it in just 48 seconds, 0 errors. Her baseline processing and number naming speed were phenomenal, but man, she really struggled on the horizontal grid. It took her a full 85 seconds to read across the page, and she made a ton of errors. We're talking 5 omissions, 2 transpositions, 2 substitutions, and 4 additions. She even had to rely heavily on using her finger to guide her eyes, even after the doctor explicitly asked her not to.
So here's how the math works. The clinician uses a formula to adjust that horizontal time based on her errors, bumping her adjusted horizontal time up to 84. Then you divide that adjusted 84 by her perfect vertical time of 48, and you get a ratio of 1.75. Now, why does that matter? Because the age-expected ratio for a 9-year-old is supposed to be right around 1.21. Sitting at a 1.75 ratio definitively flags this patient as performing way below her age level for reading eye movements. Her eyes literally, mechanically cannot keep up with her brain's ability to process the numbers.
Section 4. Vision therapy games. So what's the game plan when we diagnose a dysfunction, like we saw with our 9-year-old? The answer isn't automatically throwing a pair of glasses on her. Often, the absolute best treatment is active vision therapy.
And look, vision therapy is not just sitting bored in a dark room. It is super active and engaging. We're talking about fast-paced activities completely designed to train up those crucial pursuit and saccadic skills. Kids might play cops and robbers on a wall with pen lights, chasing the therapist's beam to build up smooth pursuits. They'll use number and letter pyramids for saccadic jumps. There are these rapid fixation decoding games where a kid has to jump their eyes between numbers to decode words, maybe a phonemic word like cat or a totally non-phonemic one like phoenix. They do pursuit tracing, relying solely on their eyes without using their fingers. It's essentially physical therapy, but specifically targeted for the tiny muscles controlling your eyes.
Section 5. When to prescribe glasses. All right, finally, we get to the ultimate clinical decision phase, because sometimes therapy isn't quite enough, or there's an actual underlying refractive error. So how do we determine when a child actually needs a physical prescription lens?
To put this into perspective, let's track the path for myopia, nearsightedness across these ages. For an infant, 0 to 1 year old, they need a huge prescription, greater than or equal to 5 diopters, before a doctor will even step in with glasses. Between 1 and 3 years old, that threshold drops to 2 diopters. So, mild myopia in an infant, the doctor might just monitor it as they grow. But compare that to the 5+ age group. Once a kid is 5 or older, the flowchart says give them the full correction for literally any level of myopia. Why the big shift? Because at 5 years old, they're sitting in a classroom, they have to read whiteboards, they're starting to read books, their visual demands have just fundamentally completely changed.
So, we've covered a ton of ground today, right? Going from tracking pen lights in a chair to running the math on eye movement ratios, all the way to decoding some pretty intense prescribing flowcharts. Thanks for joining this explainer. We really hope this deep dive leaves you kind of marveling at the incredible invisible mechanics that make our entire visual world accessible. Next time you effortlessly read a sentence on a screen, will you appreciate the complex, hidden gymnastics your eyes are performing?